Oscar Wilde had a great quote. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I did not have time. So it's that idea of actually to craft a powerful message in and to get to the simplicity of a story where it really lands and is clear. There's a huge art in that. Anyone can kind of just talk and talk for half an hour and sort of, but to refine a message, to really structure a narrative and make it land. And so therefore, ironically, sometimes the shorter it is, the more work there is, because actually you're refining it and refining it and refining it.
Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Ravinol, great to see you again. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Lovely to see you. Yeah.
Good. Ravinol, I saw a one of your posts on LinkedIn recently, and if I'm not mistaken, you've been to Ideas Fest recently. Is that correct?
Yep. So last week I was at Ideas Fest, which they described as the Glastonbury for entrepreneurs, which I think was quite accurate.
How was it? Because I've
It was,
never been. I'm thinking about it for next year. And what do you
yeah,
think?
it was well worth going, I think. Yeah, I had also never been. Um, Went for the first time this year, and it was just felt really good to be out and about, meeting people. Everyone's there with a lot of good energy. Lots of different businesses and ideas. It was well worth it. I was going to go. Um, I think they still have a special offer on for next year if you book now, so check that out. But I was going to book it again, but next year I'll be away when it's on. Otherwise, I'd have definitely have gone back.
I've seen the special offer because I'm in the waiting list, but also for me, I need to see because I've got in the same period, I've got a wedding of a very good friend of mine, so I need to see whether I can make it
That's what
anyways.
happened to me. I couldn't
Yeah,
do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Let's see, let's see. Okay, but good to know that you had a good experience. And Ravinol, you have a very interesting profile because I know that you spent quite a few years, I guess, in your 20s living as a monk, and
Mm.
then you went through this transition from this journey from being a monk to an entrepreneur, a video maker. Just this is it's just curious. It's interesting. Tell me more about that experience, that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I often to sort of use the sort of play on the M. I call it monk to movie maker. You know, but yeah, as a teenager, I was very enamored by the glamour and the of success and all of that. But there was an undercurrent which would always pop up on the weekends with my friends. We'd be out till late, talking, looking up at the stars and thinking about all the big questions of life. And as I got towards the end of my teens, I started to, but I went to university and did a degree in psychology, even though I'd been considering becoming a stockbroker. So it was already a sort of a shift towards something that was a bit more meaningful. But then I looked into a lot of different cultures and traditions and met a senior monk who was a very dynamic and attractive and powerful kind of personality. And he offered me the chance to travel with him. And that kind of decided the next 7 years of my life. And I spent 7 years traveling in Africa, in India, and the UK and Ireland. And yeah, it was a deeply transformative period. It was very much, and so I remember a story. I, my father's like Ireland's top hairdresser. So I was always experimenting with different hairstyles and stuff. So I still had this bleached kind of grunge hairstyle, a bit like Nirvana, sort of. And but I'd taken the step to become a monk. I hadn't shaved my head yet. So in the southwest of Ireland, there's a city called Cork.
I know the
Beautiful
Cork,
part.
yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know if I told you, Ravinol, but because I appeared on your podcast, but I don't remember now. So Cork,
Yes.
I lived in Sligo for a year.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So Sligo's kind of west.
yeah.
Cork is further down southwest. Lovely part of the country, beautiful. So we were putting on a cultural festival in a big hall in Cork, and my job was to go out every day and advertise and put up posters in shops and give out leaflets and stuff. And at the same time, we were living on this campsite. I wasn't a monk yet, but I was kind of on that path. And so in the mornings, I would get up early and, go out and do my mantra meditation. And so I was on a beautiful country lane somewhere in Cork in the morning doing my meditation. And I saw these cows in a field. Now, in one level, this is going to sound totally crazy, but at the same time, it just gives you that sense. I was always what I would describe as searching for meaning in life. And I think as humans, we're meaning-making creatures. You know, we want to make sense of this experience that we're having on this, you know, floating ball, you know. And I learned something very powerful at that time. I learned the idea that in every living being, where you see the external clothing, you see the external body, but inside is a living force. Like you could call it a soul. In many traditions, I might call it a soul. So I also understood, as I was learning about all this, that that means that in those cows, there's also a living being. So I was kind of chanting to the cows, and like as I was also in my kind of naive kind of enthusiasm as a young practitioner of this. But it made me understand that actually on a higher level, everything is really connected. And although they're in a different body, they're living, they're alive, they're conscious, they have likes and dislikes, pains and pleasures. And I guess in a way that then it made an imprint in me as a young person that has carried on through all of my work later on, that I've always wanted to do work or help you know, the people that I worked with to connect to something at whatever level. It might not be to the deepest level, but at a level deeper than where maybe they're normally operating, so that we can kind of find meaning and purpose in what we do. And I guess ultimately to try and elevate the planet, I suppose. You know, the amazing thing is more and more businesses are waking up to that they can make money, but they can also be a positive force in the world rather than a negative one.
And I know that you are a big advocate for purpose-driven business. We're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
You mentioned meaning. I don't know if you, like, for me, when I hear the word meaning, a book comes to mind, which to me has been the most powerful book ever, which is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. A super,
Yes.
super
Brilliant book.
powerful book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, now from monk to did you say from monk to movie maker? Is that
Yeah, that's the kind of catchphrase.
from monk to movie maker?
Yeah.
So talk about movie making now. If you think about like, and I know that when it comes to video making for you, it's really about storytelling and using
Yeah.
fundamental principles of storytelling to make those videos for your clients really impactful. Now,
Mm.
when it comes to video storytelling for speaking on stage,
Mm.
when you are there as a video production company, you're
Mm.
doing these videos, you're capturing things and insights. What from your
Mm.
perspective, what do you think are some of the main mistakes that speakers make
Mm.
when it comes to getting filmed on stage?
Yeah. So we've been working with different TEDx events around. I was going to say around the world. I think we've only done them in the UK, but we've worked closely with TEDxLondon for over 10 years, and they are like one of the flagship TEDx events, I would say. So we've done a lot of these big multi-camera, live-directed filming of people on stage, and then streamed it around the world. Like we've done it at the Royal Albert Hall, you know, Abbey Road Studios, which was a real highlight. So what I would say is that there's multiple parts to it. There's the technical stuff. There's also the speaker training part. And I think probably that's where a lot of the delivery side is kind of where you win. So even though we don't directly do the speaker training, we've been around Mariam, who, for example, is the curator of TEDxLondon, and seen how she works. So I think a large part of it is, and obviously I'm saying this to a speaking expert, but is to have one key idea, one controlling idea, right? And to not be afraid to pause and hold the stage, right? So, for example, one of the things, if you're talking about it being filmed, is to have the production company in on the rehearsal. Because if there are key moments, like in your talk, where, you know, sometimes, for example, they'll hold up a book, or they will. We had one amazing activist talking about women's rights in, I think it was Afghanistan or somewhere like that, cut her hair. So, for example, there was going to be a very key moment in your presentation or your talk where we, by working closely with the filming company, in the rehearsal, we were ready for that. So we
Because
knew
you
it was
knew it.
coming.
You knew
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So rather than just sort of, so be proactive, I guess, is my first tip there. Be proactive. Don't just presume that they'll know that that moment is going to happen. So in rehearsal, so yeah, so we were ready to capture that. Other times we had a speaker at the Royal Albert Hall who wanted to, we had to rig a camera in the ceiling of the Royal Albert Hall, looking directly down at the audience. And then the speaker was going to ask people to stand up if they had a, I don't know, say stand up if you're a woman, or sit down if you're a man, or whatever, so that you would create a pattern of people within the audience. And then the camera would scan these people and turn it into a musical song. So for example, again, like that, you can imagine. So preparation, proactive with the camera team. The other thing is it sounds like a simple thing, but is, unless there's a very special reason, like you're going to be like Stuart Lee, who's a comedian who does it on purpose to make it feel awkward, never ever look at the cameras because it breaks that fourth wall, if you like. It breaks that sort of sense. You're not supposed to know you're being filmed, if you like. It's just the cameras are capturing you. Also, if you do struggle and you forget your lines or something, that is the beauty of editing. So, because especially if you're being filmed with multiple cameras, you just, and the speaker training would recommend this too, you just stop, pause, gather your thoughts, breathe, go back a sentence or two until you've got a good juncture to start, and just start again. And then in the edit, that can be seamlessly ironed out.
I guess that's what I know. That's what happens at TED
Yeah.
often. And because you mentioned TED, you've worked with TEDxLondon for 10 years. Well, in addition to what you said, is there anything else in terms of what does TED get right about filming videos and then spreading them? That also we can, is there something that we can learn from that?
Yeah. Well, in terms of first of all, they set a very high benchmark in terms of the quality. Now, obviously, anyone who's done a TEDx event, which is kind of like a franchise, will know how stringent they are on the branding and everything else and the standards. But I think the thing that some TEDx events struggle with is they don't all have a lot of sponsorship because it's a volunteer-led thing. So with TEDxLondon, they have like 100 volunteers. They've got, big corporate sponsors, so they can invest into the venue and the tech and the sound and the lighting and so on. And they're sort of trying to, I would say they're as good as the main TED events. But sometimes you'll come across a TEDx event where they just have one camera and a very poor sound system and so on. But I think if you're talking about big TED, that standard, they set a benchmark in terms of at every level. So they'd have, obviously we're talking about film, but also they're vetting the speakers. They're not just letting anybody speak. Then with TEDxLondon, they're working with those speakers for up to 6 months to get that talk just right, But from a production perspective, there's three parts to the success of a good film from the filming side. Lighting. So they have instantly recognizable lighting. So they have a red circle, perfectly lit. The rest of it's in darkness, unless there's key things like the letters that are lit up. They have a light blue kind of light across the audience, but they have and obviously really good sound. So, for example, if you're a speaker and you're going to be on an event like that, this is something that you can do to ensure your sound is good. Obviously, you do a sound check, but like you and I have beards, for example. A lot of times with TED Talks, they have these kind of little headset mics. And if they're put on you, but they're too close to your beard, we've had it before where it starts to rub. For women, it could be earrings. It could be anything that, you wouldn't think of yourself. But so those are two sort of insider tips, if you like, of things that, you can have a great microphone on you, but if it's touching your beard or you've got earrings or whatever, it can interfere with your sound. What else can we think of from their perspective? They have multiple cameras, so it's immersive. So you've got that classic front-on shot, which sets the whole scene. hopefully it's a beautiful venue, makes you look great in this great venue. You've got that straight on close up shot, which is like a really immersive shot. You've got a couple of side shots where you can when we do it, we're directing those cameras. So we're not just setting up four cameras and just cutting between them. Each camera is getting up to maybe 5 to 10 different shots. So it really feels like it's like, the proms at the Royal Albert Hall. It feels like a proper TV experience, but it's just them being broadcast on the internet instead. But yeah, you want to have all of those shots. Like, for example, sometimes we'll get a wide shot with the speaker on the stage and the audience, because they often are very well attended. So you, as a speaker, it sets you up to look great. As a viewer, it really pulls you into the story, because by having multiple cameras, we're able to then, for the key moments or the emotive moments or the big moments, go right in for a close-up. It gives you an immersive experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Some
Yeah, and Ravinol, you mentioned earlier being proactive from the perspective of the speaker. In addition to what you mentioned already, for example, you said, okay, if you engage the production company in advance during the rehearsal, then the production company knows that, okay, there will be this particular key moment and we need to be ready for it. Is there anything else in terms of what to do before the talk to be prepared from the perspective of the speaker? And it could be, again, advanced communication with the production company, with the event organizers. Anything else that the speakers need to be aware of?
I think a large part of how they perform on stage is mainly influenced by the speaker training component, if I'm honest. We are mostly there to capture it. And so, but in terms of their interfacing with us, I'd say that's probably the main thing, is just to make sure that if you have anything out of the ordinary, to make sure to communicate it up front.
Okay, understood. And I'm just curious, when you are there, you with your team, you are there capturing these talks, filming them. What what are you trying to capture? Is there anything in particular that you like to pay attention to?
Yeah. So we're trying to basically make, as much as possible, give the viewer a fully immersive experience that's almost as good as actually being there. So that's why I'm saying you're using almost like you're creating a patchwork of shots, like sequences of shots that bring you into because when you're sitting there, imagine you're sitting in the stalls, you see the whole stage, you see the speaker, you see the balconies, you feel the audience, you know what I mean? You're taking it all in. So if you just imagine, then how do we translate that in how we edit them so that people can feel that immersiveness? It's, you want to almost be giving them a variety of shots that helps them to see and feel all of those components. So that's why, again, it's not really ideal. Like, the best thing is to have at least three cameras, I would say, as a minimum, and then not just to have them all locked off and leave them, because that's a very static experience. Every time it cuts to that shot, it's always the same, right? So when you raise the bar, it means from that one camera, like I said, I can get 5 different shots from that camera. So and also, for example, there are key moments in our decision making. We'll always start the same way. So it'll be, for example, it might be on a wide. As the person walks on, as they reach the circle, we're straight into a close-up. Then if you're always trying to cut away to audience shots if there's laughing or interaction, and obviously at the end as well for the applause. So you do, as you become familiar with the format, you know where the key moments are, to watch out for. But overall, the main thing is you're trying to make it an immersive experience for the person who's sitting at home, as ideally as much as possible, as to what it would be like to be there.
Yeah, so it's looking immersive. And if we go now from speaking on stage to, we know today lots of people make video content at home in their
Yes.
own, or maybe in their own studio. And
Mm,
we're not talking about professional studios. Now,
no.
again, if you think about that kind of context, like what's if you want the minimum viable setup that someone needs to have for them to look
Mm.
professional, even if they don't have a professional studio?
Yes. Well, it's interesting because it actually it's always the same key three things, whether you're doing it at the Royal Albert Hall or you're doing it at home. It's the image, the sound, and the lighting. I mean, those are your key three things. So, for example, if you set up a camera or a iPhone, or camera is obviously getting a lot better. One of the things I would try to encourage people to do is to streamline their workflow, because anyone who's tried to create content at home, there are there are multiple parts to it. There's the planning, there's the filming, then there's the editing, and then there's the sharing online. It takes up a lot of time. It really does. And obviously you want to try and make it as efficient as possible. So if you can film on your phone and edit on your phone, brilliant. Or you can film on your phone and send it to an editor, or whatever way it is you decide to do it. But if you film on your phone or on a camera and you don't have a microphone, actually, I don't know if viewers can, if they're on the YouTube video, you can see a very small little thing on my lapel here. It's like a little microphone, and I have a camera over here to the side, and it's a wireless setup. It's only like 120 pounds, but it's amazing. And so you can actually have a little wireless mic on you, which plugs into your camera or your phone. And instead of the sound being picked up by the device, which could be a meter, 2 meters away, it's this close to my mouth. So immediately, the audio is way better. Now, in the beginning, you know, you'll still hear yourself from the other device far away, but it just won't be as good. And you're trying to basically dial up the quality on each of the three core, items. So equally, um, the image, like I say, nowadays, in all honesty, I even me, I would happily record something on a up to date iPhone, you know, with a proper audio input. And then a ring light, or I have a light here as well, like a softbox light. What you want is a soft light. So in other words, a ring light is quite soft, or a light that you can put a kind of a softbox around, so it diffuses the light, so it's not that harsh light with shadows. Again, you can get a good light for £100, microphone for £120. So a little bit of investment initially, but so worth it. And I think the key thing there is that each time you bring in so imagine if you have a camera with no lighting and no sound, it won't necessarily look bad, but you just then turn on the light and you go, oh, that looks a lot better. And then you bring in the sound and you go, oh, that looks a lot better. So they're sort of small things, but actually together they can make a big impact. So I wouldn't be recommending people go out, and as tempting as it might be to spend loads of money on loads of kit initially, get good at doing it, get good at the basics with simple gear, and then you can always scale up if you want to.
Yeah, small things, but they all add up. And from your perspective, we talked about mistakes when it comes to that for speakers being filmed on stage. Do you see any when you watch maybe video content online, do you see some mistakes that people make when speaking to camera from your perspective, of course?
Yeah, of course. Well, one of the things that we did. So my main business is Be Inspired Films, where we create content for organizations. But I ran a business called Video Know-How for almost 10 years, where we would go into organizations and train them to create some of their own content, DIY content. And it was amazing. Like it's so common for people to feel nervous on camera. It's a very natural, normal thing. And to be honest, even sometimes when we're going in and filming CEOs and stuff, you're chatting away normally, and the next second we're turning on the cameras and people feel on the spot. So I think there are tips, but one of the best ways is just to keep doing it. The more you do it, the more natural it gets. Because it won't feel natural in the beginning. Like, it's okay. And I think just acknowledging that is good, because there's nothing wrong with you if it feels a bit awkward at first. But we would often say, look, imagine we're just having a chat down in the pub or at a coffee shop. That's the kind of cadence or, sort of mood that you want to be in, because inevitably that's you at your best when you're just fully relaxed. So I guess the tip would be to try your best to imagine that the cameras and the lights and stuff aren't there. If you're talking to a person, it's a lot easier. That's why video podcasts are a lot easier than just talking to camera on your own, because there's someone to look at, there's someone to bounce off. It feels a lot more natural. But if you are talking to camera on your own, you can. There's a very powerful idea that I once heard from. It's actually from Terry Wogan. He was a very famous radio host. He like super famous. Like, he's a bit older, but really loved. And once he was asked, "Oh, how big is your audience?" And he'd have millions of people tuning in every day, and he said, "Just one person." And then people were like, "Well, it's kind of confusing." He's like, "No, I always, even though I know, there are millions of people out there, I always just imagine I'm just speaking to one person." So it makes it, it kind of takes the pressure off, I guess, in one way, but it also makes it feel intimate and hopefully natural and personable. And yeah, he was really able to capture that at scale. So I think that's another tip. What's most personal is also most universal. And I guess it's not being afraid to be human. I use the word battled. I feel like I've grappled or battled with this myself, even though I'm often on camera. The default is to go into presenter mode. You can't, like, I don't know what it is. We feel like someone's just thrown us up on the stage and we've got to entertain or something. But actually, sure, be upbeat, be bubbly, have good energy. But if people meet you in ordinary life and they accept you as you are, why would they not accept you? It's all that's changed is there's a different medium to reach them. It's not like we have to turn into a different person. So I guess that would be one words of encouragement is try your best to do it as often as you can, practice, but your goal should be to get as close to how you normally are in real life as possible.
Yeah, and it's so true that of course you started by talking about nerves, and if you do it once, yeah, you said it will not feel natural. It's not supposed to feel natural. Perhaps that's another mistake that people make, Ravinol, that they assume that, oh, there's something wrong with me because it's supposed to be natural. No, it's not. It's not a natural
No,
thing to do. But then if you do it 10 times, it will feel a little bit better. You do it a
exactly.
100 times, much better. You do it 1,000 times, and then you'll see the
Yeah,
difference.
yeah,
And that makes I also loved the insight around speaking to an audience of one instead of even if like that person had millions watching him. And
yeah.
you also use the word energy.
Uh-huh.
You said, okay, you want to have good energy, high energy.
Yeah.
Now, when, for example, when you work with your clients, you said you go to organizations and maybe the CEO needs to film something,
Mm-hmm.
speaking to camera. Now, do you have any tips if you want to take their example as your typical context? Say, for
Yes.
example, that someone needs to do multiple takes,
Yes.
or maybe it's a long session, maybe their CEO, or maybe again for someone at home, I often do, I like to have themed days, for example, and it could be I block half a day or maybe a full day to do just that, video, video,
Mm.
video. Do you have any tips to keep the energy
Yeah.
and dynamism high in those kind of contexts?
Yes. Absolutely. It's a large part of the work as a producer and that we are doing on set with people on camera. So it's almost like you're kind of like a coach to the person, and you are trying to help them maintain that energy. And it's very, first of all, you're assessing where the energy is at and then trying to keep it up, because that is a good point. Like they say the camera adds, a couple of pounds or whatever it is visually, but one thing that also does feel a bit unnatural is you almost need to give it a little bit more energy than you. So there's two things together. One is try and be as natural as you can as to how you are normally, but with a bit extra.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, sometimes we have it with people where everyone's different. Some people are more bubbly, some people are more quiet, but we'll say sort of really give it, a lot of positive energy. And they're almost there. And then sometimes you have to say, look, it's going to feel a bit weird. You're going to need to almost, or sometimes I say, let's just try it. Let's just try it. What feels a bit over the top. But then we'll watch you back and we'll see, no, it just comes across as enthusiastic. So that's one thing. In terms of doing additional takes, it's the same thing as we say about it feeling uncomfortable. It's totally normal. People often feel like, you have to be very careful. And this is, if you're with a producer, if you have someone, brilliant. But if you don't, you have to be applying the same thing to yourself. Beware of falling into that kind of, you can go into a slump very easily. You're like, oh, I didn't get it right. Oh, again, I didn't get it right. Oh, no, I'm really messing this up. Oh, no, I'm terrible. I'm useless. And it's totally normal, unless it's live TV or something. That's the whole beauty of being, recording it, is you can do multiple takes. And not only that, it's actually normal to do multiple takes. What I will normally say to people is this is a process. We're going to do it together. We're going to work closely together. And it's actually good if we have to do multiple takes, because it means we can explore together what works well. We can kind of pick up on little bits. I'll give you little tips and coaching. And so that's good if you've got somebody like me there. If you haven't, you can watch it back yourself. And you can do that, or you can do it with a colleague or whatever. I mean, it's good. I think it's good to have someone there if you can. It's not always possible, but if you can have someone there, because they'll see things that you won't. And yeah, usually after 5-6 takes, you just get a little bit better every time. And then you go, okay, that was the one,
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts around repurposing content, especially in social media, or maybe it doesn't have to be social media, in other platforms, and without it though feeling repetitive?
Absolutely. I think I have a lot of thoughts around repurposing content. I've been talking a lot recently about this idea of creating a storytelling ecosystem, whether it's in your big organization or your small business. So it's like essentially, there's 3 main sort of ways that we think of this. There's plan, enable, and create. So the planning part is where we help people to map everything back to their strategy. So you're not just creating content because you think I need to create content, or, hopefully not doing it last minute, even though I do it myself sometimes like that. But the ideal thing is like, what are the 4, 2, 3, whatever it is, big things that are the most important for your business this year and will move the needle the most? And how can we plan to create content that will all feed back to those big 3 objectives? So anything like the time, the energy, the money that you're putting in, it's worth it, right? So we call that strategy mapping. Then there's what we call story mining. So it's like this idea that I sometimes talk about of don't make yourself or your organization the hero of the story. This is a big one, because that's marketing, right? And it actually is, it does feel like the same story, told in different ways. Whereas what we want to do is create a whole storytelling ecosystem around what we do that is multiple different touch points from very different angles. So if you make some stories about your staff, you make some stories about your customers, some stories about your partners. If you're a charity or something, some stories from your beneficiary's perspective. Now, these are all the stories of the organization, but just indirectly. So I often use this example. If the postman knocks on your door and you open the door and they hand you a letter and you open it and you read it and it's great news, right? You will look up at them and smile, and you'll be like, oh, thank you so much for bringing this to me. So it's a bit like that. As an organization, we want to be like that postman, or as a business, so that we're bringing these stories that are relevant to what we're doing, and they do reflect back on us in a very positive way, but we're just not putting ourselves at the center of them. And I think it's a lot more appealing to people to sort of, I guess, be brought into your ecosystem in a human way, So I sometimes also use the phrase moving from marketing to meaning. And it's this idea that it's more about human storytelling than marketing. But it also means that you're not relying on one piece of content. It actually relies on building out lots of pieces of content that are different touch points that people can come into your world with. But you can repurpose content. I think a great way to repurpose content is what we're doing right now, like long form. If you do, whether it's a regular podcast once a month or even just once a quarter, where you have a really deep dive, nicely filmed piece of content with either, like I say, either a partner, customer, one of your team, or even just somebody that is well known in the field that your customers come from. You can share that as long form, but also it's this idea of, I sometimes call it like a content waterfall. You can actually then maybe cut it into 10-minute sections that are about a very particular topic, and that's valuable and could be used in certain circumstances. But then you can cut it down to as short as 30 to 90-second clips as well, which are, and all together, this is your kind of storytelling ecosystem that you're bringing people into. And at each touch point, they're getting a little bit more connection to you or what it is you're doing. So I think it is important to repurpose content, but I wouldn't, if at all possible, I would start by making the plan. It's like your map, the key things you want to head towards, and how can we uncover stories that can help lead us there. The middle bit that I mentioned, enable, is where we go in and train people to do some of this themselves. And then the create bit is where the moment is a big moment. It could be you need to raise a bunch of money. It could be that you're launching a new product. It could be that you have to attract an amazing team and you need a really powerful story. And that's where you might then hire someone in to do that for you.
Before we continue with this episode, I just want to share a few resources that I think will be super useful for you. The first one is check out either my book, Confident Presenter, or my colleague Phil Wakenall's book, Business Presentation Revolution, or both. These are books for business owners and leaders who want to take their presentation skills to a higher level. To make the most of the books, take the Confident Presenter Scorecard, which is an online tool that allows you to assess your presentation skills for free in less than 3 minutes. And then also, at the moment, I'm running a series of free presentation skills web classes, and I'd love to see you there. The links are in the show notes. Now, let's go back to the episode. Yeah, and I loved your idea around the organization who wants to make a video not being the hero of the story. It's not, and I see so much with video. Also for us, Ravinol, with presentations, with talks, the speaker often makes the talk, for example, in our space, and I see it's the same with videos, about them. It's not about you, it's about them, it's about the audience. And now for organizations who don't have, because you've been sharing lots of tips already, but you've been doing this for many years. You know what you're talking about. You're an expert. For those who want to get started with these things, an organization wants to give it a try, get started, but they don't have a lot of budget. Now, in addition to not calling your company, but what should they do? How can they get started with these things initially without having a lot of budget?
Yeah. Well, I think the simplest thing I would recommend if you wanted to start today is sit down, spend an hour, and before you think about content, I mean, I'm repeating a little bit, but like think about what are the 3 biggest things I want to achieve this year, right? And actually then write them down and then think about, okay, what are some of the stories or ways that I could share about what we do that would actually help me achieve those? So maybe it's that we want to expand what we do through partnerships. Okay, so how could I then celebrate some of the partnerships that we already have that I could share with some potential partnerships so that I could actually give them that social proof to start that conversation and achieve those things. So now I'm not just creating content, I'm creating content that is for a very specific purpose. And then I would think about, okay, how can I do it? Do I want to, so for example, I would invest in some of that simple kit that I talked about, genuinely, I'm not even joking, on a like an iPhone, especially if you, it's pretty good on the auto, but you can actually use some apps, like there's a Blackmagic camera app where you can actually unlock all of the full features of your iPhone camera manually, but obviously you need to know a little bit what you're doing. And I would just do I would start by doing some simple interviews, film a little bit of B-roll. One tip for if you're a visual person or you're a process-driven person about how to capture what you need to tell a story using video, I often use the example of a railway track, right? So you got two tracks. One is what we're going to hear, and one is what we're going to see. People often confuse and think that we always have to see what we're hearing at the same time, but we don't, because when we bring things into an editing program, I'm doing something with my hands here a little bit, like there's different tracks. The first step I always recommend is to get the narrative right. So whether it's a mixture of a voiceover or interviews with you and someone else, don't even worry too much about the visuals for a moment. Get a clear narrative of what you want to say. And then the second layer is the visuals. Now, sometimes it's going to be the person talking. That's fine. But then the other part is what we call B-roll, which basically means, or sometimes called cutaways, because you cut away from the person speaking to what we see. And that can be stuff that you've filmed yourself. It can even be photographs, it can even be stock footage. It can be a variety of things. It could be some stats on a nicely designed thing that you've created. But I suppose if we're trying to say how to make it less daunting, to simplify it, to really break it down into its basic components, think of it like that. I'm gonna record a good audio message that I'm sometimes going to see the person speaking, and the rest of the time I'm going to put in some other visuals that help bring that story to life. And I would just start by creating a couple of pieces of content. It's a bit like pressing record. You gotta start, and then obviously you can improve from there.
Another thing I liked so much about what you just said, and it's very much connected to what we do as well, Ravinol, which is the idea of starting with the narrative. Now, in our space, for example, you have for speakers, you have the message, your narrative, your story, which also I believe is the most important thing. Then you may have the visual aspect. When it comes to public speaking, often people use slides. Doesn't have to be slides. It could be a flip chart, a whiteboard. And we don't even have to use them. Now, if we do, then of course, if we do it well, they can reinforce and support and amplify your message. We don't want to see the typical death by PowerPoint. Then you also have the speaker, the delivery side of things. But the most important thing, often people think that, okay, you want to improve your presentation skills. And I'm sharing this, Ravinol, because I see the connection with what you do. Okay, we need to think about delivery. We need to think about eye contact, body language, gestures, voice. Now, these things are important. They can help you amplify your message. But without a narrative, without a story that resonates with the audience, it doesn't matter how good your visuals are. It doesn't matter how good you are from a delivery perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. There's something I always say to potential clients when we're chatting initially, and it kind of ties into this. It's like they might say, well, how much does it cost to make a 6-minute video or a 2-minute video? And I always say, Oscar Wilde had a great quote: I would have written you a shorter letter, but I did not have time. So it's that idea of actually to craft a powerful message and to get to the simplicity of a story where it really lands and is clear. There's a huge art in that. Anyone can kind of just talk and talk for half an hour and but to refine a message, to really structure a narrative and make it land, And so therefore, ironically, sometimes the shorter it is, the more work there is, because actually you're refining it and refining it and refining it. But yeah, it's a very good point. The other things are like the icing on the cake, but the narrative itself has to be strong.
Yeah. And also what you said, the mark of a great communicator, whether it's on stage, on video, is not defined by often by what they choose to include in their message, in their narrative. It's often defined by what they choose not to include.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
harder to do.
yes.
And now you talked about making it land, making your message land, making it impactful. I understand that to help your clients do that, you have your own framework that you call impact.
Impact. Yeah,
Tell me more
impact.
about how you go about it.
Yeah, because our focus, if you like, the clients that we work with are all about making a positive impact in society. So we've kind of structured our model around impact with the acronym, you know. So the first one is insight. So again, it's just that taking a moment to step back to really get clarity on the purpose. And so I would invite viewers to also do the same, even if they're doing it themselves. Don't rush into the solution immediately. It's like step back. What's the insight? What's the purpose? And really make sure that the effort that you're going to put in thereafter is going to move the needle on the things that are actually valuable to you or important to you, if you like. Then we got meaning, which is what's at stake? Why should anybody care? And it's a good question to ask because sometimes, a bit like making yourself the hero of the story, we think it's important because it's important to us. But actually, you have to ask yourself, yeah, but why should somebody who's not us actually care? Like, what's at stake? Let's try and get to the crux of the issue, you know? So that's M, which is for meaning.
From their perspective, not from your
From the
perspective.
audience perspective, not
Exactly.
from yeah, exactly. And we work a lot with academics and researchers and people like that as well. And they are so head down in what they're doing. They think it's all important. And you know, often it is great work, but then when you come to communicating it, you have to almost sift through it all to find where is the gold and where's the point at which the audience will meet us that they're interested. And my friend Mariam, who's the curator of TEDxLondon, she often uses this phrase that this won't be the last time you communicate or you speak, or this is not the last piece of content you're ever going to do. So you absolutely do not need to say everything. But you need to say enough to get them to take the next step. So I also sometimes use this example. I describe let's say everything they're doing almost as like a huge big event that they're organizing. And so there'll be, you know, a banquet, there'll be performers, there'll be a venue, there'll be decorations, there'll be you know, all of these things. And I often help them to understand that if we're creating a piece of content for them to you know, kickstart or get people to be excited about this big banquet they're organizing, think of the video content I say to them as the match that lights the fire that will cook the feast. So it has a very important role, but it's very specific. It's not about the entire thing. So if it actually ignites people's interest and gets them excited, wanting to know more and take the next step that you want them to, totally successful. If you try to tell them everything about it, you're almost starting to talk them out of having to know more because they've already told them everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
So
similarly when
true.
speaking.
So true. Okay, so we've got impact. I am.
Yeah. Next one is P, which is production. So that's where you get into the tools. So it's okay. How are we going to share this story? Is it a film? Is it a podcast? Is it a documentary? Is it an animation? Or is it an event? You know, so we know why we're doing it. We know why it matters. Now, what's the mechanism of delivery? So production. So that's P. A is activation. So thinking about how you're going to reach the right people from the beginning. A lot of people, even our clients, they think that the job is done when the piece of content is created. And in one sense, you know, it appears to be, but actually, until it actually reaches the right people, then it's not really done its work, right?
I'm guilty of
So
this. I'm guilty
we
of
all
this.
are.
Yeah.
We all are. Well, so often that's the thing, isn't it? We, as much as we're teaching other people, we're talking to ourselves too. Often the way. Then we have compounding, which again is back to this idea of reusing content, recutting content, planning ahead, so that if I'm thinking about how I'm going to create content for the year based on my 2, 3 big things, then when I'm creating content in this quarter, I already know what content I'm going to be creating in quarters 2, 3, and 4. So perhaps the content that I'm creating now can feed into that. Whereas if I'm not thinking that far ahead, I could have been at one of my partners doing some filming and miss an opportunity to film some stuff for later on as well. So it's this idea of, we often hear in investing terms, people say compound interest. Yeah, and they talk about it's the game changer. So I'm trying to get us to think about content as compounding content. How can each piece of content we create be reused? Also, how can it compound on everything else that we're putting out as well? So sometimes I use the phrase as well, like telling the same story in 100 different ways, but making it feel different. But really, it's talking about the same key concepts. You know what I mean?
You made me think of another interview that I've done on this podcast with Carmine Gallo, who's an
Yeah, very
authority
famous.
in this space,
Yeah,
and he talks about the importance of sharing the same idea talking about the same stuff for 10 years.
yeah,
And at first, if when you hear it, you may think, okay, really? Like, do I need to talk about the same thing for 10 years? Because he says, if you want to be successful, that's what you need to do. Of course,
yeah,
it's not saying that you need to say exactly the same thing over and over again for 10 years. Every time you
yeah,
do it, you want to package in a different way. You want to keep it fresh. And there's
yeah,
skill in there. But yes, you need to have that kind of commitment. If there's and this perhaps goes also beyond what we're talking about here, but from a communication perspective, from a business perspective, if you're talking about impact. If we want to make an impact, if there's a problem that we see and we don't like that thing, and we can solve it, and we can help others solve that problem, then
mm.
if we've got that fire, then you won't say it as something boring. You will say it as a necessity, like talking about it for 10 years, of course, every time in a fresh way.
Yeah. And also,
And that compounds.
it does compound. Yeah, that's a perfect example, actually, because you must have found this yourself. I find it quite amusing, actually, how people don't take in all the information. So we think we create a post or a clip or a reel or whatever it is, and we think they've taken in all the elements. They may just pick up a fraction of it. And so this is the importance of, talking about the same thing and compounding, because each time, so you could think I've shared 10 pieces of content this week. Oh, people must be overwhelmed by all of this content. But if they're only picking up a teeny fraction of each bit, you'd be lucky if by the end of those 10 pieces of content, they've even picked up, they still might not be sure what you do. Now, you learn that over time by kind of talking to people, by realizing, by hearing feedbacks and stuff. But you could easily be, if you don't understand that, you could easily think, well, what's the problem? Like, I've been sharing loads of content. Surely they know exactly what I do, but they don't. They only pick up little bits. So you really do. It doesn't make sense rationally, but you need to be regularly, like, as you say, more than just for a couple of weeks or months, like, talking about something to become known as the person who does that thing. And the last part of impact is transformation. So this is measure and learn. And that's as much for yourself as for the client. So, what was the impact? How much difference did it make? What can we learn? And that's the other beautiful part about, if you're talking about the same thing. If you're learning, which you will be if you're doing it, if you're in the arena, out there, doing it, then you'll also be improving all the time too. So even though you are talking about the same topics, you're bringing fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, fresh learnings, and that's how we all get better.
Yeah. And I'm curious, Ravinol, you've helped so many clients, individuals, organizations tell their story in an
Mm,
impactful way. Is there, and it could be something from the past, it could be something that perhaps you're working on at the moment. Is there
mm,
one story that you've helped someone or an organization tell that
mm.
really stayed with you? And if so, if something comes to mind, why?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're really fortunate in that most, if not all, of our work is, deeply meaningful stuff and stuff that I started the business and called it Be Inspired Films. Actually, my senior monk that I was traveling with, he unfortunately passed away with stomach cancer in 2001. And just before he passed away, he gave a talk to the youth, and he said something very profound. He said, you must find something that inspires you and do that. That's how you can, stay enthusiastic. And so years later, I was sitting in my car outside my house talking to a friend who was also starting a business. I was starting a business. We were going through all our names that we thought were clever names for a business, mostly really cringe. And then I came out and I said, Be Inspired Films. And so, we obviously help people who are doing good stuff, but it's also because I need to seek out work that inspires me, as much part of it, back to that thing about meaning making. So a project that comes to mind, a recent project, is um, very close to home. We did an animation. It's going to be launched actually next week. We did it a couple of months ago for the NHS, so the National Health Service here in the UK. And basically, the brief was there are more and more young people now, who are neurodiverse. Whether it's autism, ADHD, sensory processing, different learning challenges, or I guess just different brains. The brains work in a different way. And particularly with the police, there are a very high percentage of young people in prison or, get in trouble with the police and go on to be in prison post 18 who are neurodiverse. It's a huge amount because they struggle with their impulse control, their emotions, in moments of crisis. And equally in education, oftentimes they just are not suited to sitting there in a class and just being quiet and just doing, doing all being the same. So the brief was to create a powerful story that could help teachers and police officers to better support young people who are neurodivergent, especially when their behavior is challenging, because sometimes it will be challenging. And we created this great animation. The lead character is called Jack. And he is struggling in school. He's fidgety, he's tapping the tables, he's always like wanting to interrupt and ask questions. He's disrupting, maybe appears, disrupting the students around him. Teacher doesn't know how to cope with it. It's getting frustrated. So that's one of the scenes. Then, he gets excluded from school because, he's misbehaving, quote unquote. Just basically he's not able to sort of fit into that environment. And then he's out of school, gets in with a bad crowd, kicks a stone, smashes the shop window, and the police get called. And then, he's in trouble with the police. And then we do a rewind, a classic. I don't know anyone if your viewers or listeners are old enough to remember VHS tapes. When you press rewind and you could see the image going like that, kind of fuzzy and kind of backwards. So we do that, and then we go, what if we could do it differently? What if we could support young people with maybe ear defenders? If, say, class is too loud, they can, overstimulated with sound. What if they could have like timeouts in a quiet room and reflect and on things that might be working or not working for them? What if the police officers knew to deal with them in a slightly different way than they might deal with other people? Then their life could very much go one way or the other way. And one means crisis and potential, falling out of education and getting in trouble with the police. But the worst part is feeling terrible about themselves. And the other one is feeling like, yes, I've got challenges, certain things I need to work on, and I struggle in certain situations, but I can do it. And the reason why the project's so important to me is because, firstly, it has the potential to leverage, because it's going to be like a training tool, so it can potentially like train huge numbers of people to act differently in those crisis moments with young people and affect young people's futures. But my own son, I've got two sons, 11 and 14. The younger son, he, when he was 7, started to display some of these characteristics, and we went on a whole journey, and he was excluded from school, and he struggled, and he, he felt terrible about himself as he was trying to figure out all this stuff out. And we, as a family, went on a whole big journey. And so I know firsthand how difficult it can be, and how even in the most well-meaning mainstream schools, they often really just don't get it, and they're not geared up or trained, I guess, informed enough to know how to act in some of these situations, which can be difficult for teachers and students. So I'm really proud of that project, very excited to see it coming out, and to see, to do that last part of the impact model, the T, to see what impact it can have. And hopefully there's a possibility we'll be doing a whole series of those. So yeah, looking forward to that.
The transformation. Yes, you should be proud. So that means, if I understood well, that the video is not live yet, right?
It'll be live in a week from the day we're recording. So hopefully by the time you go out, I'll put the link in.
Please share it with me. And then, because we're not going to publish this next week, so I want to include the link to the video in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
And I was sharing this with Graham Alcott, the author of Kind. I interviewed him recently. He also shared in the conversation that his son, a very similar situation to yours, that his son has those kind of similar challenges. And I was telling him that I have full respect for people like him and you, because my wife works with children and parents of children with, like, as you said, where the brain works in a different way. I very much understand how challenging it is for the child, for the parents.
Yeah.
So yeah, respect. And just a couple of final questions. One is around AI, and then I also want to talk about your approach to meaningful work that you've mentioned. When it comes to artificial intelligence today, if you think about what we talked about today, especially from a storytelling perspective, what are your thoughts around using artificial intelligence from a storytelling perspective while keeping the humanity, if you will, like, while being human, while being authentic?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting space we're in right now with anyone who's kind of, seeing things popping up in their feed or, advertisements. There seems to be a new app every week that, can, I don't know, it's almost like what it must have been like years ago, where they're saying, put some salt into a microwave and it'll turn it into a 4-course meal or something. It feels a bit like that. It's these huge promises. Like I saw one the other week where it was saying, like, you just upload one photograph and it will turn it into unlimited spoken video content,
for 10 years.
yeah. And so it's very appealing. The hook of it, the draw of it is very strong. But just like anything that seems too good to be true, it usually is. But that doesn't mean it's not useful. There's a lot of power to be unlocked with using AI selectively, and also to kind of almost just choose a small stack of key tools that can help you, and kind of ignore the noise a little bit, because it otherwise it's just like chasing the shiny penny every week, and it becomes overwhelming. And I think what we've noticed is that in actual practice, there are much less people and organizations actually utilizing it effectively compared to the promise of what it can do, because I think it's overwhelming. Also, it can do amazing things, but when you only really test it when you try to apply it to a very specific use case, and that's where you start to see that it can create you something amazing, but it might not be quite right for what you want. And then maintaining consistency across a whole film is difficult. If you want to make adjustments, it's difficult. So it'll get better and better. But again, I would start simple. It's like AI. Everybody's using ChatGPT, for example, a great tool, or whether you're using Claude, or there's multiple different models, but great tool for sharing ideas, getting clarity or structure about you. So I talk to it a lot, and I'll say, I'm thinking of doing this. These are my objectives. I've got like 4 or 5 different things I want to talk about, but how could you simplify that into maybe like a core concept that I could build something around? And so it's very good for organizing, for structuring your ideas, for doing some of that kind of heavy lifting admin type stuff. Also ideation. I think it's sometimes it gets it brilliant. A lot of times I have to even, thankfully it's not a real person, although I do find myself still remaining respectful and saying
Me
please and
too.
thank you and
Me too.
stuff.
I know exactly what you mean.
But at the same time, I'm starting to get a little bit more, never rude, but I start to say, come on, you're getting really sloppy there. That's so fluffy and rubbish, you're really just giving me cliched ideas here. This is not good. So, but as a sort of a sounding board, sounding out ideas, definitely worth doing. Sometimes for writing scripts, you could ask it to write a script. I think you should always, and to be honest, you will need to, but like be refining what you get, but it gives you a good first draft. So I think in terms of ideation, coming up with scripting ideas, it can be a useful assistant. One thing that we've used very effectively is a tool called 11 Labs. So it's primarily a voiceover tool. And you can choose different voices, and you can do text to voice and very realistic sounding voices. But the one that I've found the most useful is where if I want my voiceover, say for I think we actually did it for this animation. So if people listen to it and watch the animation, so I recorded the voiceover in the cadence that I wanted, in the pacing that I wanted, in the pronunciation and emotion that I wanted, and then I could within 11 Labs I could change my voice to any of the other voices, but it would retain the components that I had inputted into it. And that's very powerful. That's very powerful. And then of course there are tools like Midjourney and some of these other tools, but they're still quite you still need a lot of trial and error, and you still need a little bit of tech know-how. So I recently one of the things that we're doing underneath our enable way that we support organizations is going in and helping them to cut through all the noise and create a simple AI stack that they can use. So you're almost staying true to the fundamental storytelling principles and not getting too distracted, but using AI to help you do that. And that's where we're building an internal capability for the organization to do some of that themselves. But the key thing is, never to lose sight, especially if you have any kind of purpose-driven aspect to yourself, or even if you just from a reputational perspective, never lose sight of the fact that it might be cool, it might be shiny, it might be flashy, but it doesn't mean it's better. You need to retain the humanity at the core of it, because that's ultimately what connects the basic principles of a good story. It's I actually, just before I wrote down, I'll share them now, I think it's a good idea. A good story, I think, it has simplicity, it has clarity, it has emotion, it has depth, it has humanity, it feels real. And sometimes that word authentic is used a lot, right? So sometimes people feel like it's just a cliche now to say authenticity. So you could swap out authenticity and say it should feel real, right? And it should feel personal. So whether it's from your perspective or a particular character's perspective. So if you want it to include all of those things, then maybe you're going to have to make sure as a human that you're inputting some of those things into it, even if you're using AI as a tool. But handing everything over to AI is, I think personally, is a big reputational risk, because it can be a huge help, but I wouldn't let it replace you.
No, I agree 100%. It can, yes, it can be a huge help, but it has to be AI plus you, plus the
Yeah.
human side of things, not
Yeah.
a complete replacement. Ravinol, let's close with your thoughts around, you mentioned a few things already. I'd just like to close with this because it's such an important aspect of what you do and what we both believe in, purpose-driven business, your Be Inspired films. if I'm correct, in 2025 became the first media production or video production company in the UK to become a B Corp, which
2015, yeah. Yeah.
2015, which is great. Yeah,
Yeah.
tell me more about your ideas around purpose-driven entrepreneurship, business, meaningful business, meaningful work.
Yeah, I think when I started the business in 2008, my goal was to help purpose-driven organizations tell their stories. At that time, more than now, that would have been more, in health, education, charities, government. They would have been more the typical. There was CSR at that time, but that was kind of like a bit of a bolt on for corporates. They would be doing their business sort of activities, but they might do some community stuff as the CSR. But as time has gone on, I think more and more businesses are wanting to be successful and profitable, and they should be, because one of the things we don't talk about a lot in sustainability, because we think it's about the environment and stuff, is financial stability, sustainability. If you're not profitable, you're not sustainable. You know what I mean? So even though I've often been around, social enterprises and then B Corps, fundamental, you have to be profitable, because otherwise, you're not still around. But if you can also start to think about the sustainability in terms of the environment, your climate impact, your well-being of your team members, and your staff, your I don't want to go make it sound so grand as your theory of change. Like some organizations have a theory of change, but like, how can what you do have a bigger impact than just helping the person you're helping? And for us, and I know it's the same for you, is if the person you're helping, if part of what you're helping them do is have a bigger impact and a bigger influence. So if you're helping people speak and tell stories on stage, and we're doing the same thing to help people do that through content, these are almost kind of like, that's not where it ends. These are like kind of time bombs in a way, you could say, that if, how effective we are able to help our people get crystallize their ideas and then put them out into the world, these stories have the potential, literally, as cliche as it sounds, to change the world. It's what has always changed the world. Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. I guess we want to be on the side where we're trying to help the people who are trying to do it for good, right? And so I'd invite everybody, whatever they do, to figure out, how can I do what I do, but also unlock some extra value in what I do. So it could be, there's different models. So there's like the Tom's Shoes idea, buy one, give one.
For one.
Yeah, 1 for 1. Some people do 1% for the planet. It could be that so obviously there's a guy that I've supported recently, Sebastian Bates, who does this
I know
martial arts. Yeah, you know him through the Dent. Yeah. So he does very successful business training, effectively probably wealthy kids in Dubai and in the Middle East. But what he's done now is he's set up the Bates Foundation, where he goes out to, I spent some weeks with him in Africa earlier this year, training young people in Africa who are really lacking opportunities to take advantage of that character building and pride that they get by learning martial arts. So there's different ways, but I think business is a huge part of all of our lives. It's a huge part of the way money moves and ideas get shared. So thinking about how you can align your business with something positive, whether it could be becoming, like, say, a patron of the Bates Foundation, which I have done and other people have done, or it could be setting up something yourself, or it could be finding ways to support people that you can start the domino rolling, and then it's through their work that the impact actually happens, but you help them to do that. It's something you probably need a little bit of support, like maybe an outside sounding board to uncover, because it's not always easy to see yourself when you're in it. But I'd invite the audience to consider, how can their business become a force for good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. Business as a force for good. We went for at least for now, because it's
Mm.
a dynamic journey, for
Yeah.
a one-for-one model. We've got a
Mm.
project, a social impact project called Kids on Stage, where for every
Oh, nice.
client we pay the school tuition to an underprivileged kid so they can go to school, because we've aligned a brand with goal number 4 of the UN goals, quality education.
Beautiful.
And yeah, so again, congratulations, Ravinol, for what you do, how you do it, your approach. And for those who want to connect with you and say hi, where should they go?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as Ravinol Chambers. I'm on Instagram as Be Inspired Rav. Those are my main two channels now. But obviously they can check out beinspiredfilms.co.uk. We're on all the channels at Be Inspired Films as well. And I guess I just invite people to lean into the idea that storytelling is not, it has the power to unlock all the things that you want to achieve, whether they're personal, social, business wise. So start to think about how can you create a storytelling ecosystem or a storytelling psychology almost in your organization. And obviously that's what we aim to do with the people we work with, is help them to do that.
Thank you very much, Ravinol. I had a fantastic experience when I was a guest at your podcast. I had a
Yeah.
fantastic experience today as well. You've
Yeah.
been great both as a host and as a guest. So thank you very much again, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, actually the podcast Storytelling for Social Impact is another place that people can tune in if that's their cup of tea.
And by the way, let's close with this, because you mentioned Sebastian Bates. A few years ago,
Mm.
I hosted an event, the Good Pitch Summit, and it
Oh,
was a
nice.
way to give purpose-driven entrepreneurs an opportunity to pitch their idea. And Sebastian was one of the speakers. I invited him, and he came. I think he came in that edition, because we've run it for a few years. He came second. But
Yeah,
then in that edition, you see, sometimes even if he came second, one of the judges was, I know that you know Mark Lerouste.
I know, Mark.
He was one of the judges, and he was so inspired by Sebastian's idea that I think Mark also became a
Well,
patron, or maybe
the,
he's also
you know,
supporting somehow.
I talked about the idea of a domino, like a domino effect.
Yeah,
So you put on this pitch event. Seb spoke at it. Mark became a patron. I became a patron because of Mark. So you see, you set something in motion when you release a story or ideas that have the potential to make a positive change. It's the possibilities are never ending, in terms of what can happen.
this is so cool. I didn't know that the connection was so large. I knew
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Mark, but also with you. That's amazing. Again,
Hmm.
Ravinol, thank you very much. All the best.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like, so please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com, or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.